We are living in an age of unparalleled complexity. Climate change, global health crises, economic inequality. These are all what policymakers call wicked problems because they're interdependent and have no single solution. Traditional approaches to problem solving tend to rely on intuition, historical precedent, or political considerations, which aren't well equipped to handle the complexities that we face. At least, that's according to Harvard Kennedy School professor Soroush Saghafian, who argues that we need a fundamentally different approach to solving the world's most pressing problems. In his new book, Professor Saghafian outlines his approach. It's called analytic science, and it's a systematic way of using data and analytical thinking to understand complex systems and develop effective solutions. On this episode of Behind the Book, we speak with Professor Saghafian about his latest book, Insight-Driven Problem Solving: Analytic Science to Improve the World. Professor Saghafian defines analytic science as the discipline of using data to build models that help governments, businesses, and nonprofits make better decisions.
If you want to understand the world around you, you should make models and you should use them to solve problems. So a lot of analytic science is about, making the right models that describes the situation that you're trying to solve or understand, and that use that model, which are essentially a set of assumptions, to go from whatever evidence that is available to you to solutions.
Take the 2008 financial crisis. When it started unfolding, the full scope was overwhelming. Failing banks, a collapsing housing market, rising unemployment. So, policymakers approached the crisis analytically. They identified key drivers of the crisis, including how mortgage-backed securities distributed risk throughout the banking system. For each of these drivers, policymakers designed targeted responses, like new regulatory frameworks to address systemic risks, liquidity programs to restore credit flow, and stress tests to assess bank stability. Through insight-driven problem solving, policymakers were able to get the global economy back on track by creating elegance out of complexity. This example represents what Professor Saghafian sees as the most valuable promise of analytic science: the ability to leverage the vast troves of information available to us into actionable insights for social good. Professor Saghafian's own research focuses on using analytic science to improve various aspects of healthcare.
In my lab, we are using, for instance, AI techniques to find better solutions for treating cancer patients, right? How do you use large amount of data that is out there in EHR systems of the hospital, for instance, to create AI tools that can recommend treatments for each specific patient.
Analytic science is not value neutral. Professor Saghafian urges us to remember that while data can reveal patterns and relationships, humans must decide how to act on those insights and shape the kind of society we want to live in.
One of the issues that I discuss in the book is that how do you prevent from using data to go to wrong insights? Although, during that path, you're doing everything correctly, but you still come up with wrong insights because data is not enough. And, I use this quote that says, "You're smarter than your data." Right? So don't think that just because you have data, you can just, provide the solution. There are steps that needs to be taken.
Professor Saghafian reminds us of several ethical dimensions to keep in mind when pursuing analytic science. The first is the question of equity. If analytic science remains concentrated in wealthy organizations or countries, it could exacerbate existing inequities rather than addressing them. The second is the question of privacy. The same tools that can optimize public services can also enable large-scale surveillance. The third is the question of fairness. Analytic systems can amplify existing biases in historical data, leading to discriminatory outcomes.
In medicine, for instance, the idea has been that, we treat an average patient. They say, for an average patient that is, female and is between 40 and 60, the best thing to do is this. But look, the average person doesn't exist. We have lots of data about each individual. We can completely personalize treatments for patients.
And finally, there's the question of transparency. When important decisions are made using analytical models, how do we ensure that those affected can understand and challenge those decisions if necessary? To address these ethical implications, Professor Saghafian calls for a deployment of analytic science that considers human welfare and social good from the start. He emphasizes the need to challenge assumptions that data-driven decisions or the data themselves are fair or even objective, and he thinks it's critical that the tools and methods of analytic science are made available to as many people as possible, including through his new book. The book is Insight-Driven Problem Solving: Analytic Science to Improve the World. It's written by Soroush Saghafian, Associate Professor of Public Policy at Harvard Kennedy School. It's published by Cambridge University Press. This has been Behind the Book, a production of Library and Research Services at Harvard Kennedy School. Find past and future episodes of Behind the Book by subscribing to Harvard Kennedy School on YouTube, subscribing to our newsletter, and visiting our website.